Welcome to the Sporting Crypto podcast, where we talk to leaders in sport and Web3. Joining me on today's episode is Maik Brodowski, who is the head of Europe at Bitpanda. Mike, how's it going?
Good. Thanks for having me here, Pat, today.
Straight from the airport into the recording seat.
Indeed. Smooth journey in. So be grateful to be here in London today.
And first-time podcaster.
First-time podcaster, indeed.
And why don't you tell us about your journey a little bit before we get into what Bitpanda is for those that don't know?
Perfect. Yeah. I started my professional career in Copenhagen about 2 decades ago. Was started my career in an esports in the esports industry when it was already taking off. And I think the two things that I learned from that experience that kind of carry through the almost 2 decades now is what make right holders tick, what is important for them, where they put the focus on, and at the same time also build a very good network from those times from a global scale to understand basically different nuances of that. From there, I am entrepreneurial minded, so I started my own advertising agency, also in Copenhagen, where we were on the forefront of bridging US video inventory to the German-speaking countries and advertisers in the German-speaking countries, as well as the Nordics, for nearly 7 years before partnering with a UK MarTech company that allowed us to scale that operation into 25 markets globally. And after nearly 10 years on the agency side and on the consultancy side, I really wanted to experience working for a brand. So I've done that for about 4 years, leading the DACH operation of a consumer-facing brand, where I also had the first touch points then not only with media deals and larger marketing remit, but also started to work with Bundesliga football clubs, started to work with tennis tournaments in Germany and Austria, and really integrating sport partnerships into the marketing mix. And then about 18 months ago, I joined Bitpanda, first as a commercial director for Germany, building it up to in that current position where we're at, including the partnerships, and as the beginning of this year, serving as head of Europe for our B2C business, which means that I'm helping and supporting our local teams, scaling our activities and continuing our journey to dominate the European market from a poker perspective.
And what got you interested in kind of the blockchain side of things?
I think that was about 2017, 2018 at the first touch points with some friends who were very early on into the whole crypto scene. But I'm also in general very interested in everything that is finance related. So it was a mix of the finance interest of myself, as well as then having friends talk about it, that got me into crypto.
Let's talk a little bit about Bitpanda, because I think there is some nuance in terms of what exactly defines a crypto exchange. And so we were talking off air just before we started. Bitpanda isn't actually a crypto exchange, it's a broker. So do you want to define to the audience who might be not as crypto savvy to just exactly what that nuance is?
Of course, and I think it's a nuance that is quite unique in the industry, where we are the broker. So we are making it quite easy for end consumers in the end to sign up through our services. And what we're doing in the background then is pairing the orders with the different exchanges that we are connected to and working with. So it's a quite unique proposition, but allows us also to have a very friendly user interface for the consumer in the end. No order books, etc., but we really make it easy for the consumer in the end, because that was the mission where our 3 founders, Eric, Paul, and Christian, wanted to make it easy for the customers when they started about 10 years ago, Bitpanda in this business, to make it easy for consumers to buy and sell basically cryptocurrencies.
So you mentioned 10 years, right, of Bitpanda. To me, as someone who's been in this space since 2017, I only remember Bitpanda for the last 3 or 4 years. So I'd love to hear like a history of the business in the last decade.
Indeed. No, it's a long time. When the three founders, Eric, Paul, and Christian, started the business, it's headquartered still to this day in Vienna, Austria. So it's actually a physical office, quite a nice office, basically in Vienna. We also have other offices around continental Europe. And what the business has done is put very early on a focus on regulation and licenses. So it obtained a lot of national licenses across the different jurisdictions. That has changed, as we know, as of this year with the MiCA regulation, where we are, and we're the first major crypto platform that managed to obtain a MiCA license. To this day, we have 3 MiCA licenses, and I think it underpins the very early focus that 3 founders and the team have put on working very close with regulators and putting a lot of focus on compliance in itself. And then about like 2-3 years ago, we started to really put a communication strategy together on how to bring it to a larger audience. And that included, among others, also our partnerships that are, of course, highly visible on the sports side and media partnerships, but to really commercialize the good fundament that is there.
And you mentioned that when you were in your esports days, you realized and got to know what makes rights holders tick. And the big reason that I know Bitpanda is because of the go-to-market strategy, being very focused on sport, which is, I think, similar to, Crypto.com have done that kind of pretty well in the US as well. Why has that been a route to market for you folks? I know you've only been there for 18 months and some of this predates you, but it'd be interesting to know kind of some of the inside baseball, like when you're sitting down and saying, okay, this is where we want to spend our marketing dollars. Why is sports so compelling?
I think, first of all, sports is highly visible, and I think you get to know us also from some of those partnerships, but sports is just one element of our marketing mix. So we also are working very closely with media owners that help us to activate those partnerships that I go into more details in a second. But then also we're working very closely with influencers across Europe, but also with local affiliates. So it's really a well thought through marketing mix that we do have, and sports just plays one element of it. But of course, it was very clear for us when we sat together that we want to invest in sports. We looked at the landscape at the time. What are the sports that we really want to start investing in? And we identified that we want to do that with 3 sports. One is football or soccer. The other one is tennis, and the third one is American football. So we decided to not pursue any other activities besides that, staying very clear to that vision. And the first one that we then signed on was Bayern Munich from a football side. Then of course added AC Milan as our second club, and then added earlier this year Paris Saint-Germain, who won the Champions League right now, to our roster of partnerships. And the latest addition is FC Basel, the Swiss champion that is also completing then basically for the time being our football roster. But it's something where we also very carefully picking the partners that we want to work with. So we have a clearly defined strategy of what is important for us. What is important is that the mentality and needs to be aligned between us and the rights holders.
Tell me a little bit more about that. What do you mean by the mentality exactly? What do you look for when you're speaking to someone and they pitch you or you're pitching them? What are some of the things that really hammer home, this is someone that we should work with?
Yeah, I think it needs to, on the one side, align with what we want to be as a brand. Second one is they also need to strive to be the best. That's why we also, in the very early days, decided then to partner with, for example, Bayern Munich. It's their mantra also, Mia San Mia. and them always trying to improve their own. So that is a natural fit to what we're looking with a partner. And I think another interesting component is a lot of the partners that we do work with previously did not work to that extent with companies in our space. So we put a lot of focus on both sides, getting to know each other. And is there a natural fit? Basically, can we bring something else to the table? Besides, of course, commercial value that is making this partnership unique, and then on top, we're putting a lot of emphasis not just to place a logo or place our logo, but put a lot of focus also on activating those partnerships. So we're integrating the different players into our latest TVCs. We're doing that also with American football. We're signed to testimonials that we're integrating into our bespoke NFL spots and presenting spots. So it's something that we really think is a 360 part of our marketing strategy, not just to put our logo there on the LED board or cam carpet, but to really integrate the clubs and partnerships in our activation strategy.
And what does some of the activations look like if we dig deep? Is it kind of media activations using influencers and third-party content? You mentioned athletes there. What are some things that you're doing in the weeds?
Yeah, and I think it's a good question, because what we're doing. I mean, when we take Germany as an example, we're partnering with Bayern Munich. We're also at the same time working very closely with Sky and DAZN, who are the broadcasters of the German Bundesliga in Germany, where we are the one of the media partners of them. We're also working very closely then, for example, with the different broadcasters that are broadcasting the NFL games in Europe, be it BN Sports, be it M6, be it DAZN, be it RTL, to really have a close connection to the audience. And so what we're displaying there from a content perspective is then very, very tailored to that audience. So be it, for example, on the NFL side, we have produced two different presenting spots, one for the regular season with our testimonials, another one for the playoffs and the Super Bowl, just to keep it entertaining for the end consumer in the end.
Is there a temptation from your side to become a bit more ingrained? So what I mean by that is, we're talking about fan ID, fan engagement, all of those things that I think blockchains are playing a bit more of a part. I mean, we're seeing like MoonPay and other providers like that play a role in that world. Exchanges are looking mostly at traditional inventory. What do you think? Is there a temptation to go down that route and become a bit more plugged in?
We're always looking at ways to be more plugged in, but for the time being, our strategy is really to focus on what allows to drive attraction to more customers. Basically, we're always looking at ways to integrate it deeper. But we also are working very closely with our partners both on the B2C side, like our sport partnerships, media partners, but also with our B2B partners, like that are part of our BTS offering, working very closely of bringing crypto to the masses. And for us there, we're focusing a lot at this point on the traditional assets and really driving activations, be it on the ground activations or be it activations also online or through content that I mentioned earlier, to increase the crypto adoption there.
I guess there's also a infrastructure perspective to this as well, is in the sense that we've seen a lot of exchanges do activations that are kind of, I guess, ingrained, but it's more of a like, hey, come and mint this NFT or buy this fan token on our exchange. And I guess there is always how do we get people to sign up and deposit and buy tokens and so on and so forth. So there is that kind of dichotomy as well, which makes it a little bit more difficult from your perspective compared to like a tech vendor who can say, okay, well, you want to do this? Well, maybe we can build it, or we built this for this team before. We can do the same thing for you.
But that is also the point. I mean, we are from our core business a broker and a trading platform first and foremost. But we're always looking for partners that we can integrate into our activation strategy there.
What do you see as like good ROI for you as Bitpanda when it comes to doing some of these deals? I mean, some of the deals must be, big big dollar tickets and some might be more modest. Like, what is it apart from the kind of aligning of values when you're sitting down internally and people are saying like, Mike, why do we do this deal for this many million euros a year? What are the things that you point to that makes everyone smile and happy?
I think the very crucial one that any business needs to be doing when evaluating any kind of marketing or media investment is to really sit down. What is the North Star metric that we want to move? What is the strategy that you want to execute against? And then drilling down then on the marketing side, or how are you basically attributing your marketing spends to the different funnel stages in the end, right? I mean, one is clearly meant for creating the brand awareness, another one then more towards the lower funnel. And what is crucial in any industry is really to finding that mix between top line and investments that are really creating the brand and putting you as a brand into a specific spotlight, but then also being able to utilize that increased awareness and guide it through the funnel and ultimately also keep loyal customers in the end.
Double clicking on that, we've talked to other exchanges on the show before where they talk about like, well, this is one metric. It's wallets opened to its funded wallets, and then it's funded wallets above this value, and then it's funded wallets above this value who are doing this many trades. And so when you kind of look at it specifically to sport, I suppose there is a huge demographic overlap, right? It skews male, it skews into the same demographic that are kind of like interested in digital assets. So are there any kind of key metrics, components that you're able to share that are things that you look at?
I think we look at a lot of those metrics that you mentioned. I think for us, it's also interesting to understand how is the brand being perceived. So not just looking at what is the brand awareness in a given market or in a given target group that you're of course able to analyze, and which we're doing from a market research perspective, but then deeper down into it, right? I mean, how is your brand perceived? And that's also why we're partnering with certain rights holders and assets and not with others, as we have a very much a focus on engaging with premium rights holders. So for us, it's also that next layer of how we are being associated with, what is the trust in the brand, and then of course still drilling deeper into the funnel and different other activations that we're doing, other than more performance oriented, right? I mean, when you're doing a social activation, for example, you can tailor it more than towards the ones that you mentioned, right? I mean, new accounts opened, etc. But it's I would say also sponsorship is should not just be seen as a clearly just a performance or last click attribution, but as a larger part of your media strategy.
Very well said. And on that note, we've got to take a quick break to thank our sponsors. I'm happy to remind you that this podcast is sponsored by the Hedera Foundation. The most beloved sports brands understand that what fans want is simple, a reason to be passionate. The Hedera Foundation enables brands and fans to share their passion on-chain using the Hedera network, the most used sustainable enterprise-grade DLT for the decentralized economy. This podcast is also supported by Credenza. Credenza harnesses blockchain technology to power a real-time data synchronization platform that transforms customer data ecosystems. They make data more relevant and actionable for sports brands, teams, leagues, and IP owners. Find out more at credenza3.com. Welcome back to part two. Mike, so we've been talking a little bit about what makes rights holders tick. And I suppose the thing that I kept hearing, I guess even the middle of 2024, was I'm scared that this is going to get shut down. What I'm doing is going to get shut down because of regulatory reasons. And my feedback was always like, hey, hang on as hard as you can because I think it's going to turn soon. Like, it's a matter of time. Things are happening that aren't really highlighted in the headlines. It's only the bad stuff that has been highlighted. But there is stuff happening in terms of micro in Europe, whereas there were brands in the US that I was speaking to who were just like, what even is that? You know? And I said, it's like a watershed legislation in Europe, and there is no way the States is not going to follow suit. There is no way the UK is not going to follow suit. Since then, obviously, luckily I was correct. We've seen the US passing the Genius Act for stablecoins in the US. There's also the Clarity Act that's following. In the UK, the FCA said there's going to be crypto asset regulation by 2026. The Bank of England said that there's going to be rules for crypto rules for banks by the end of this year, potentially in 2025. So a lot has changed in the last 12 to 18 months. Take me back to when you started at Bitpanda 18 months ago. We're in June 2025 now. So you started kind of end 23, early 24. Talk me through your conversations with the rights holders at that point compared to now.
I think the conversations for us, particularly on the regulatory side, hasn't changed much. I would say because we always focused on having one of our key arguments that we are already regulated. We had at the time already the BaFin license, among others in Europe, among other licenses in Europe. So that conversation never changed for us from that aspect. But of course, there was a lot of, or are still to this day, a lot of question from rights holders. Are you having the right licenses in place? What is your general focus on this? And I think it's good that those discussions are happening because it just allows the industry to move into the next stage and to grow into that aspect. It needs to have a regulatory framework. And for the very first time, or one of the very few times, Europe is leading that, as you said, with having the MiCA regulation on the continent that allows you to basically passport your license to the other European countries, which makes it, of course, easier to start offering your services in various European countries, and also is now a standard that you need to have in order to operate. Plus, also, right holders will be asking for that more and more. Are you having the right licenses in place?
We've seen there are some negative headlines that happen. I get sent them all the time by rights holders and people in your position and say like, hey, this person's just mentioned this. Do you know much about it? I mean, a really good example is DraftKings Rainmakers. When DraftKings had the NFT fantasy game Rainmakers, I remember vividly when that shut down and there was a lawsuit in the US. And I know the US is a bit different because you can have civil suits. Anyone can say, hey, I'm suing you. And if you have enough people come to the bill, then you can kind of wrangle enough money to get a lawyer and go to court, so to speak. But even that headline, I vividly remember one major brand in the US, but multiple other rights holders saying to me like, hey, do you think this is going to have a big impact? And my response was, and this was like 12 months ago, my response was like, I think it will in terms of the perception, but the reality is that like regulation is happening and it continues to happen. And this is quite weird timing. And so I think a lot of brands got caught in this quite weird gray in between where it was like unregulated, getting regulated, and is regulated. Mm-hmm. And a lot of things got shut down in that middle period of is getting regulated, where I'm presuming people in your position would be like, we're getting this license, we're doing this is happening. Look what a industry colleague just did. Is that a difficult kind of middle ground for some rights holders? Do they need that like absolute clarity that this is safe, this is license compliant before moving on?
I think in any industry, it's important to hold the right license in order to operate and in the end also advertise. So it's something that will be asked more, particularly also from our industry. As I mean, you mentioned the US. I mean, you had enough negative examples also, and a lot of trust from rights holders into our industry was eroded there. So it does take time. It takes a lot of discussions, a lot of dialogue to build up that trust. And we're, for example, quite happy also to be partnering with in various European countries with the NFL, and even that announcement made headwinds in the US at the time. But it also shows if you're focused on regulation from day one, in the end that is it what pays off on that side.
Can you tell me a bit about the NFL partnership? I mean, there's been a few firsts. The ATP one is the first that the ATP have done with an exchange or with any crypto business in that kind of variety. The NFL have been very slow purposefully on the crypto front. I mean, they have NFL All Day, but that's with Dapper Labs, and that's the NFLPA. Obviously, the European side of the business is partnered with you folks. How different was the conversation with, say, an NFL to a football team or the ATP in terms of you've got like a soccer team in Europe, you've got the NFL, which is like the most prestigious IP in the States, albeit the European side. You've got ATP, which is very global. What are the nuances and differences between the conversations that you have with those when you're kind of going to the negotiating table?
I don't want to say there's difference. I think there's a lot of similarities, particularly with the partners that we partnered with, like Paris, like AC Milan, like Basel, like Bayern Munich. They're all they're all the top assets basically in their local markets. From a club perspective, but then also from a league side, they're all just putting a lot of focus on partnering with the right partner in the end. And I think that is something that we'll see more and more happening. But it's all the same discussions in the end about why should any of those IPs or any of those leagues and teams, why should they be partnering with us or someone from our industry when there were so many negative examples beforehand. And once we walk them through who we are, where we come from, that we have an office in Vienna, nearly all of them basically, we had meetings in Vienna as well. It just establishes that trust that you need to have as a foundation. And I think that is what is also helping us to position Bitpanda as a trustworthy brand by exactly partnering with those organizations that previously have not partnered with someone in that industry, just by us emphasizing and executing our strategy there.
When you're having conversations with someone from the US, from like an NFL, and kind of referencing some of those negative examples that I mentioned, is it harder to convince there? Is it harder to build that trust and affinity rather than like a European-based soccer team that might know someone that knows someone that knows Bitpanda? Same with the ATP, huge global coverage, but particularly in Europe. Is it more difficult with some of the US brands where you're like, hey, we're this European-based crypto broker and we're partnered with AC Milan and Paris Saint-Germain and blah blah blah, or is it better than you first thought when you were engaging in those conversations?
No, it's a valid point, right? I mean, the further we're away from where our core markets are, the more we need to explain. The more we need to explain the regulatory framework. The more we need to explain who we are, because of course our right holders within Europe had one or the other touch point with us already, either by seeing us somewhere and getting of course like credibility through that. Of course, the further we are away from Europe, the more we need to explain why we want to work with the rights holder in this aspect, and how we also want to activate it afterwards, and in the end also underpinning our strategy there. But yeah, it is like that. Yeah.
And outside of your position at Bitpanda, when you're looking at the space more broadly, where do you see some of the opportunity where sports and crypto meet?
I think there's a lot of different strategies that a lot of the companies in the blockchain crypto space are following. I mean, you mentioned it earlier. I mean, some are more focused on the fan engagement side. Others just do it for the awareness building. I think there's a lot of different use cases and overlaps that are happening, and I think it's exactly that time right now where, particularly in Europe, there's a regulatory framework right now. And you can kind of discuss with right holders at different stages of where you are as part of the industry, how you can work with them together. So that's I would, I think, encourage everyone to start exploring that, and really outlining to the rights holders what kind of benefit you can bring to the table, be it like in the increased fan engagement, reaching into new audiences. I think Paris Saint-Germain is doing that quite well, focusing a lot themselves on the whole blockchain topic. Also, the ATP is doing a lot in that regard when it comes to Web3. So they are starting to have those dedicated teams, and I think it's the right time to start building on that as part of the ecosystem.
Where do you think some of the sports teams are still falling short and not understanding and still viewing this only as a commercial opportunity, a sponsorship opportunity, and not looking beyond?
That's a very good question, and I think it comes from the I think the lack of understanding. I mean, it's yes, it's a couple of years old industry, but it's still very new compared to legacy industries, right? I mean, if you're a car brand, it's quite easy what you can bring to the table. You give the players the cars, you put your branding there. Telecommunication is easy, but but I think it's not yet clear for everyone in the position of a rights holder at all levels what they can get out of a partnership by partnering with someone from the Web3 space on what they can bring to the table. So I think it's just having that dialogue, get to a common understanding, and build from there. So I would say education is the one that needs to be done more, rather than also just doing it always in isolation. So I think that's also a reason why we try to be present at a lot of different conferences, not just the blockchain and crypto conferences, but also sport conferences, just to talk about the industry and what everyone can get out of it.
You must speak to a lot of rights holders, right? So final question on this, but there must be some that really impress you, right? Where you're like, these guys get it, right? What are some of the things that don't impress you when you're being pitched? Like, is it the fact that someone just has absolutely no strategy? They just want to slap a logo on and be done with it? Is it not understanding how the right segmentation should be? You know, we've seen, I've spoken to people where someone has taken an entire blockchain category or just an exchange category and so on and so forth. So sometimes are you having conversations with rights holders and thinking, wow, these folks are so far away from even getting to a point where we could do a deal together?
That's a very good question. And what we are having is really good discussion with rights holders that have a clear strategy, that are understanding that it's a business, but they also have an understanding not where just they want to be from a table at the end of the season, but also where they want to take the business for the next 2, 5, 10 years. And I think that the clubs across Europe are doing it quite well. I think the clubs in the UK are in a very unique position. In Germany, we have the 50+1 rule, means the clubs cannot be owned by an individual or by a corporation, where here in the UK, and the discussion that we had over the last couple of months, it's really unique to understand the power and the long-term vision that the club owners and managers do have for their clubs, how they're building entire infrastructures, how they're building new stadiums, the VIP experience that they're tailoring to the audience is, I would say, quite unique. So we're also looking forward when we're launching Bitpanda in the UK and doing a reveal of our partnership.
Look forward to breaking that on Sporting Crypto at some point. I know you've got some experience in the betting industry as well, and the final topic that I wanted to own in on is prediction markets, right? I think there was a survey that got sent out to traditional finance professionals. I don't know if you saw that headline where they asked them, what is the thing you're focusing, like, most excited about within the industry over the next year? I think 71% said like prediction markets. And I think it's really under highlighted in sport yet how big a disruption this is. And I'm going to read out a few stats here. So over the last 12 months, Betfair have matched $100 billion worth of trades on their exchange. And for those that you don't know, it's Betfair Exchange, peer-to-peer exchange. You offer odds and someone will take them on the other side. Works pretty much like Polymarket does, but it has a more varied markets than just yes, no. And so if Betfair's doing that with $100 billion, and let's say, for argument's sake, 80% of that is sport. So let's say $80 billion. Polymarket in the last 12 months have done, I think, $14 to $15 billion in volume overall. And a lot of people think, oh, it's, mostly from the presidential election and yada, yada. People don't realize over half of that volume is from sports. Mm-hmm. And so if we take that as a proportion, the last 12 months, Polymarket, who are not regulated in the US, who are banned in France and Belgium and not allowed in the UK, have done 10% of Betfair's volume. How big a disruption is this, and why is nobody really talking about it in the sports world?
I think it's disrupting on the one side, as you said, right? And I think a lot of us had touch points by following what they done during the election, potential election in the US, indeed. But I think why no one is talking about it, and I think where also some of my concerns are, and I think you outlined it, right? I mean, it's again what I said also in the beginning, is the lack of regulatory oversight on that side, and there's a reason why that is needed, right? I mean, be it appropriate KYC for protection of minors, be it also taking it very seriously, everything around gambling addiction, be it sports, be it political events that need to be taken into an account, despite if it's Betfair, if it's other gambling and betting brands, or if it's Polymarkets in that sense.
It's particularly interesting in the States because there's this federal legislation that's happening in terms of sports events contracts, which I think Kalshi and Crypto.com have kind of said we are, regulated by CFTC. That's the federal law. Kalshi have gone to court with multiple states who say, no, you have to be regulated as a gambling product because we want the tax earnings, not the federal government. There's this whole debate, and in Europe it's a bit more clear cut, right? Betfair Exchange is a gambling product, but of course there could be oversight from the FCA needed if it's crypto linked. So it's pretty complicated, right? Especially if you have like the two biggest markets, which is the US and Europe, having different regulatory oversights for something like this. It could be more complicated than people think, right?
It could be more complicated, but I think it's also that link again, I think, in any industry, right? I mean, and I don't think that is just related to this in sense. Also on crypto, we did earlier, right? I mean, there's a regulation on the continent, there's the FCA here, there's different regulatory discussions happening in the US, and I think on a lot of those ones, and I think we just need to understand also, particularly in that instance, that there's local nuances always, and you need to understand the local regulation. And I think that is where the hard one is also, in order to tailor your products and tailor your offering to the local market and to the local regulation. And you cannot offer just particular if it's such a sensitive topic, just offer one product to everyone, as there's enough reason why there's good regulation needed in those cases.
Have you been having conversations about whether or not this is a product that you want to integrate into Bitpanda? Have you had rights holders and other people not reach out in these conversations, say, hey, what do you think about this? Could this be something interesting that we do?
I think the topic always comes up once in a while at conferences, etc. But I mean, we have a clear mission as a business. Our next stage is to launch our product offering in the UK. And also continue building on being the leading provider for crypto in Europe. So we remain focused on that.
Well, Mike, I think that's what we've got time for. I think for first time podcast, I think you've done a great job. Anything I should have asked you that I didn't cover?
You covered it all.
Well, I would say you've got a good voice for podcasting, so I think you should definitely do more. Where can people find out more about you?
basically, if you want to know more or get in touch, feel free reaching out on LinkedIn. That's usually the best way. And happy to speak to people.
Fantastic. We'll have that linked in the show notes down below. You can subscribe to the Sporting Crypto newsletter at newsletter.sportingcrypto.com. And if you haven't already subscribed to the podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, do so right now, please. And you can follow me on Pet Barisha at LinkedIn and Twitter. And just before we go, just remember that none of what we have said during this show is financial, business, tax, or investment advice. And this content is for informational purposes only. Web3 is underpinned by crypto, and crypto is volatile, meaning you can lose money if you are buying these assets personally or as a business. Where we are recording right now in the UK, the majority of crypto asset companies are unregulated. We'll have more Sporting Crypto content for you soon.